Rethinking Education, A Journey from Historical Practices to Data Empowerment, by Dr. Janet Johnson. Copyright 2024. EdStar Analytics, Inc. Dedication. This book is dedicated to the late Marvin Pittman, a champion for educational equity within the North Carolina education system. Through his roles from a dedicated teacher and principal in Wake and Durham counties to his influential positions at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and the State Board of Education, Marvin tirelessly advocated for access to advanced mathematics for Black students. His commitment often placed him at odds with prevailing attitudes. After presenting data at a conference that highlighted the readiness of many Black students for advanced math, data that could significantly bolster advocacy efforts, a colleague at NCDPI warned me about sharing this information with Marvin, mockingly referring to him as Mr. Johnny OneNote, because of his singular focus on promoting access to advanced math. We at EdStar adopted this nickname affectionately, recognizing Marvin's unwavering focus as a powerful force for change. Marvin understood the power of data and used it effectively. He would often take me along to advocate for high-achieving students from his church, Compassionate Baptist, who were denied access to advanced courses, knowing well the transformative power of solid evidence. This book strives to honor Marvin Pittman's legacy by continuing to advocate for the rights of every student to reach their fullest potential, much like he did throughout his life, reflecting on the journey from demographics to data in education. Dive into the heart of how education has evolved from a reflection of societal norms to a robust, data-driven system. This book ventures beyond traditional boundaries, charting the shift from demographic-based practices to sophisticated data use in shaping educational outcomes. It's not merely a tale of numbers and statistics. It's a narrative enriched by cultural transitions, technological leaps, and the redefinition of career pathways that have revolutionized how we teach and learn. In earlier times, educational systems often mirrored the broader social landscape, organizing opportunities and resources based on socioeconomic, racial, or gender-based criteria. This method, deeply integrated into the societal fabric, subtly perpetuated existing disparities under the guise of tailored educational support. Today, we stand at a pivotal juncture. The introduction of achievement data has transformed educational landscapes, uncovered unexpected insights, and challenged our preconceived notions about who students are and what they can achieve. This data-driven approach offers a nuanced perspective, revealing the complex interplay of various factors that influence educational success. As you turn these pages, you'll explore how these profound shifts have not only altered policies and mindsets, but have also set the stage for a more equitable and effective educational framework. This journey is not just about understanding where we've been, it's about steering where we're headed, using data to forge pathways that uplift every student. Embark on this reflective exploration to grasp the full spectrum of educational evolution. Through this journey, we aim to empower educators, administrators, and policymakers with the knowledge to leverage data in crafting learning environments that foster genuine growth and opportunity. Let's redefine the future of education together, ensuring that every student benefits from a system that values data as a tool for enlightenment and transformation. The 1960s. Teachers' Lounge Conversation, 1960s. Imagine a lively 1960s American high school teacher's lounge, adorned with a large black and white photograph of NASA's Mission Control. A group of teachers gathers, their conversation infused with excitement and pride about the space race. Mr. Thompson, have you all seen the latest update from NASA? The strides they're making are extraordinary. It makes you proud to see those fine young men at Mission Control, doesn't it? Ms. Parker, indeed, it's inspiring, and it highlights our role in this grand endeavor. We need to identify the young men in our classes who show a real aptitude for math. They could be the future engineers and scientists leading these missions. Mr. Adams, that's right. It's about steering them towards the rigorous math classes, giving them the foundation they need for a potential career in space exploration or technology. Mrs. Collins, it's a profound responsibility. We're not just teaching math, we're shaping the minds that will uphold America's legacy in space and science. Did you hear that some colleges are now making Algebra 2 a requirement for admission? It looks like we'll need to ensure all our college-bound students are enrolled in that course. Mr. Johnson. Yes, them and any future rocket boys we can identify. And imagine, even some sons of factory workers might go to college if they can tackle this advanced math. It could be a real game changer for them, opening doors that were previously closed. Mr. Thompson. Exactly, and it's such a pivotal time. We can guide these students towards paths they might never have considered. Who knows? The next person to make a giant leap for mankind could be sitting in our classroom right now. Ms. Parker. It's about unlocking potential and providing opportunities. These young men could be among the next generation of leaders in science and technology, thanks to the education we provide. The bell rings, and the teachers leave the lounge, each carrying a renewed sense of purpose, aware of their role in shaping the future during an era marked by scientific exploration and ambition. Standardized tests. During the 1960s, aptitude tests were used for state-standardized tests. These tests aimed to gauge a student's likelihood of succeeding academically. They included tasks like pattern recognition, reading comprehension in which students read a passage and then answered questions about it, and analogies that required a strong vocabulary to solve. Unlike achievement tests, which assess what students have already learned, aptitude tests were designed to forecast a student's future academic success. Intelligence was thought to be a fixed attribute that doesn't change with experience and quality instruction. The test results were reported as percentile rankings. They were thought to convey where students ranked in intelligence. One might say that, as an institution, schools had fixed mindsets, as defined by Dweck. Dweck, 2006. Research has since shown that a student's performance on these tests could be heavily influenced by their exposure to language and concepts outside of school. For example, lacking vocabulary could hinder their ability to demonstrate understanding of analogies, regardless of their cognitive abilities. This data was not usually used officially by educators. It merely reported to parents how their children ranked in intelligence compared to their peers. Institutional fixed mindset. An institutional fixed mindset occurs when a school or educational system operates under the belief that student abilities are static and predetermined. This mindset manifests in policies and practices that categorize students early and rigidly. Foundations of equity. The war on poverty, free lunch, and the onset of remedial education services. In the mid-1960s, the United States government initiated the War on Poverty, which aimed to reduce persistent poverty by improving living conditions and expanding educational opportunities across the country. A critical element of this initiative was the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, ESEA, of 1965, which included the introduction of Title I funds. These funds were specifically targeted to improve educational outcomes for children from low-income families. Alongside ESEA, the National School Lunch Program was expanded to include free and reduced-price lunches, serving as a practical indicator of economic need within the student population. Mrs. Adams. Have you all heard about the new Title I funding and the free lunch program starting this year? We're going to need a new system for identifying which of our students qualify based on their family's income. Mr. Johnson. Yes, I saw the memo. It looks as if we're going to be collecting more detailed forms from the parents. They'll need to disclose their income to see if their children are eligible for free or reduced price lunches. Mrs. Thompson. It's going to be a big change. Keeping track of all that paperwork is going to be challenging, but I guess it's necessary. It means more resources for our classrooms and support for the kids who really need it. Mr. Lee. Speaking of support, I heard we're adding new staff members specifically to help with Title I students. They'll be pulling kids out of class for one-on-one sessions and small group work. It might mean some missed class time, but the focused remedial instruction could really help catch them up. Mrs. Ellis. That sounds like a great opportunity for those students, though I'm concerned about how many classes they might miss. We'll have to coordinate closely to make sure they're not falling behind in other areas. It's all about finding the right balance. Mr. Johnson. Absolutely, and it's not just about lunch. Title I funds could mean additional support staff and resources. We need to ensure accuracy so that every eligible student gets the benefits. We might need to set up some workshops to help parents understand the process and ensure they feel secure in how their information is being used. Reflections on the 1960s educational mindset. As we reflect on the educational practices of the 1960s, it becomes evident how deeply ingrained cultural beliefs and policies shaped the academic pathways and opportunities available to students. These reflections aim to explore how the fixed mindset prevalent during the era, alongside other factors, might have unwittingly laid the foundation for long-standing educational mindsets. Influence of fixed mindsets and aptitude tests. Consider how the reliance on aptitude tests, which aimed to measure innate intellectual capacities, reinforced a fixed mindset about student potential. How did this perspective affect the way teachers identified and nurtured potential among students, particularly those seen as future engineers or scientists during the space race? Access to advanced math. Reflect on the criteria teachers might have used in the 1960s to select students for advanced math courses. What role did societal expectations about career paths, such as those needed for NASA, play in these decisions? How might this have influenced which students were considered college-bound or potential rocket boys? Impact of cultural context on math placement. How did the cultural emphasis on preparing certain students for advanced roles in fields like engineering and science influence the demographic makeup of those enrolling in advanced math? Consider the potential biases in teacher recommendations and the broader societal beliefs about who was deemed capable of succeeding in careers that required rigorous academic preparation. Perceptions of mathematical ability. Reflect on how cultural contexts, fixed mindsets, and the processes of enrolling students in specific courses contributed to the prevailing belief systems about mathematical ability. How did these perceptions shape the belief that some individuals are naturally inclined towards math while others are not? Career path. Influences on educational choices. How might the traditional views of the 1960s regarding suitable post-secondary career paths have affected teachers' recommendations for math course placements? Consider how perceptions about suitable careers for different demographics might have influenced educational opportunities. The 1970s, civil rights, women's liberation, and computers. As we transitioned from the 1960s into the 1970s, the educational landscape began to reflect broader societal shifts. The decade was marked by significant advancements in civil rights, women's liberation, and the emergence of the tech boom, each playing a pivotal role in shaping educational policies and opportunities. The introduction of Title IX in 1972, a critical piece of legislation that prohibited sex-based discrimination in any school or other education program receiving federal financial assistance, revolutionized educational opportunities, especially for women. This period also saw the enactment of the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, in 1974, safeguarding student records and granting students and their parents more control over their educational information. The 1970s were a time of technological innovation that expanded into educational realms, providing new career paths in the burgeoning tech industry. This technological shift not only introduced new subjects and skills into the curriculum, but also began to challenge and change traditional career expectations. Schools adapted to these changes by integrating more technology-focused courses and reevaluating their curricular offerings to include computer science and related fields, reflecting the increasing demand for tech-savvy professionals. These changes were underscored by a maturing civil rights movement and ongoing efforts for gender equality, which continued to influence educational policies and practices. The cumulative impact of these movements began to dismantle long-standing barriers in education, paving the way for a more inclusive and equitable educational system that responded dynamically to the evolving societal and economic needs of the country. Teachers' Lounge Conversation, 1970s. Imagine the Teachers' Lounge, mid-1970s. A group of educators gathered around a table, engaged in a spirited discussion that reflected the changing times. Mrs. Ellis, the veteran math teacher, leaned forward, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. It's truly remarkable to see so many of these kids from factory worker backgrounds excelling in advanced math, she began. They seem really inspired by this burgeoning field of computer science. Mr. Thompson, who taught history, nodded in agreement. Yes, and it's fascinating that the high-income kids, the professionals, and those whose parents own local businesses are sticking to the traditional college prep track. They're focusing on rhetoric, chemistry, courses that lead to careers as doctors, lawyers, and business executives. Mrs. Davis, the school's guidance counselor, chimed in, her voice tinged with caution. There's been a push from some of the factory workers' children to enroll in those college prep courses too. Unfortunately, I must guide them away from that path. Those courses are really meant for students who are already on a trajectory to traditional four-year colleges. I think professional parents think the path to computer science is just too risky for their kids. They want the sure thing for their kids. Community colleges are now offering programming courses, I see. This is going to open up more career paths for our vocational education students. A few girls have even expressed interest in learning programming. And just last week, added Mr. Green, the vocational education instructor, a girl tried to sign up for my automotive class. It caused quite a stir. We're just not ready for that kind of change yet. She wasn't allowed to enroll, of course. It seems the system isn't quite prepared to handle such shifts. Mr. Larson, one of the older teachers, grumbled as he stirred his coffee. And now we're being forced to waste resources on girls' sports. It's ridiculous. Money that could be better spent elsewhere. Ms. Young, a newer English teacher, gently countered, But it's only fair, Mr. Larson. Title IX is changing things for the better. Imagine a future where girls' sports are as important and beneficial for them as boys' sports have been for decades. They deserve equal opportunities, and it's about time they got them. The group sighed collectively, a mix of admiration for the students' aspirations and a sober recognition of the institutional barriers still in place. As they sipped their coffee, the conversation drifted to what these changes might mean for the future, reflecting on the broader cultural shifts outside the school walls. Standardized tests. During the 1970s, schools predominantly relied on standardized tests to assess basic skills in mathematics, reading, and grammar. These tests often included items designed to evaluate pattern recognition, comprehension, and problem-solving skills, which were considered indicators of a student's aptitude. Additionally, the use of IQ tests gained traction, with results increasingly used alongside teacher recommendations to identify and provide enriched educational experiences for students deemed gifted. Student test scores were manually recorded and stored in individual paper folders within a central filing system. When a teacher needed to determine if a student qualified for a gifted program, they would physically retrieve the student's file from this central filing cabinet to review their scores. This process was labor-intensive as it lacked the modern convenience of digital databases. Teachers could not simply generate a sorted list of top-scoring students at the click of a button. Reflections on the 1970s. Educational mindset. Shifting perceptions in math education. Reflect on how the emergence of the tech boom in the 1970s began to change perceptions about the value of advanced math for children of factory workers. How did the evolving job market influence the educational tracks offered to these students? The Cognitive Abilities Test, COG-AT, was widely used to measure students' reasoning abilities through a battery of verbal, quantitative, and nonverbal items, aiming to predict academic success and suitability for educational opportunities like gifted programs. Consider how the initial absence of computer science majors in colleges during the early 70s shaped the demographic of students who pursued careers in this new, risky entrepreneurial field. How might this have impacted the social class dynamics within educational pathways? Cultural shifts and career options. Discuss how the growing tech industry and the slow acceptance of computer science in academia challenged traditional views on suitable careers for upper-class students. How did this uncertainty about a new field affect high school and college curriculum choices? How might these factors have affected computer science being classified as a vocational education subject rather than a college preparatory subject? How did the cultural shift towards more technological and scientific careers affect the educational emphasis on subjects like math and science in high schools? Resistance to educational change. Explore the resistance within educational institutions to integrating new subjects like computer science into the curriculum. What role did cultural norms and class expectations play in this resistance? How did federal policies, such as Title IX, act to mandate changes that schools were slow to adopt on their own? Discuss the impact of such policies on promoting gender equality in sports and education. Title IX and civil rights impact. Reflect on the implementation of Title IX and the civil rights movements and the effects on educational opportunities, particularly in terms of gender equality in sports and academic offerings. How did this federal mandate challenge local school policies and cultural expectations? Consider the long-term effects these on the educational and career opportunities available to women and minorities. How did this shift the cultural landscape within schools and the broader community? The 1980s. Welcome to the 1980s, a transformative decade in the American educational landscape, marked by a growing awareness of the country's educational challenges and a changing economic environment. This period saw the advent of significant federal initiatives aimed at revitalizing education to meet emerging national demands. As computers became more accessible, most schools, however, continued to rely on traditional methods for student assessment and did not use technology to analyze achievement data or manage course enrollments. Education researchers began scrutinizing the discrepancies between student achievement data and course enrollment decisions, publishing findings that highlighted a disconnect. Schools were not assigning students to courses based on academic data, but rather on teacher perceptions. Despite the availability of technology that could streamline and enhance the evaluation of student performance, many institutions persisted with manual checks of paper records when assessing student potential, missing opportunities to make data-driven decisions. The decade kicked off with the influential 1983 report, A Nation at Risk, which sounded an alarm over the perceived mediocrity of the American education system. This landmark report criticized the system's failure to prepare students for a competitive global economy and technological advancement, sparking a nationwide debate on educational standards and accountability. It called for an overhaul of public education, emphasizing higher academic standards, increased graduation requirements, and greater teacher professionalism as crucial steps towards educational excellence. In response to these concerns, the Carl D. Perkins Vocational and Technical Education Act was enacted in 1984. This pivotal legislation aimed to enhance the quality of vocational education, aligning it more closely with the actual skills demanded by the evolving job market. By providing federal funds to develop and improve vocational training programs, the Act sought to bridge the gap between education and economic needs, ensuring that students gained practical and valuable skills for the workplace. Parallel to these efforts, significant strides were made in inclusivity through the amendments to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. These amendments reinforced the commitment to providing a free and appropriate public education to children with disabilities, tailored to their individual needs. By expanding definitions and services, the amendments aimed to ensure that all children, regardless of disability, had access to educational opportunities that would enable them to lead productive and fulfilling lives. Together, these initiatives reflected a decade focused on raising educational standards and expanding access, with a clear recognition that a robust, inclusive educational system was essential for individual and national success in the rapidly changing world. Teachers' Lounge Conversation, 1980s. Mr. Jenkins, has anyone met the new computer skills teacher joining the Vaki Ed staff? I hear they're setting up those Apple IIs. We already had some TRS 80s. Mrs. Franklin, yes, I met him briefly. They're really pushing those computer courses now. Seems as if they'll be teaching things like Lotus 1, 2, 3, and maybe even some basic programming. And imagine, they might let the kids play Oregon Trail to learn problem solving. Mr. Thompson, speaking of skills, it sounds like the boys might need to learn typing if they're going to keep up in those classes. Times are changing. Ms. Carter. Speaking of changes, have you heard about Lisa and Atiba in my advanced math class? I opened a conversation with them to encourage them to go to college to become math teachers. It turns out Lisa wants to go to college to become a doctor, and Atiba is aiming for mechanical engineering. Mr. Jenkins. It's impressive, really. Just 10 years ago, options like those would have been more limited for someone like Atiba. And now here they are, opting for high-paid careers over teaching. Mrs. Franklin. With all these lucrative opportunities opening, it's getting harder to convince our top math students to go into teaching. They can make so much more as engineers or doctors now. Ms. Carter. And don't get me started on the pressure from the parents. Since this is a magnet school, the wealthier parents who manage to get their kids enrolled are constantly on us about securing spots in the limited advanced math classes. They want teachers who can really challenge their kids with advanced math. Mr. Thompson. Finding teachers who can handle that level of math is already a challenge. And now this? Mrs. Franklin. By the way, did your students get their standardized test scores back yet? Ms. Carter. Oh, they came in last week. I handed them out to take home, but I haven't even looked at them myself. There's just too much going on. Mr. Jenkins. Chuckles. Same here. We don't use them for anything, so why look at them? Besides, we know who the smart kids are. Data use. As Ms. Carter said, she sent home the paper copies of the standardized test results and didn't even look at them. A school secretary put copies in the students' folders in the office. Reflection on the 1980s. Vocational education and emerging fields. As computer courses began to be included in vocational education during the 1980s, what types of students typically pursued this path, and how were their prospects perceived by society? Reflection on changes in career. Perceptions. During the early to mid-1980s, the perception of technology and computer science careers transitioned from risky to lucrative. How did this shift impact the demographics and motivations of students enrolling in advanced math courses? Consider how this change might have influenced the overall strategy for math education in schools. Reflection on educational equity and access. With the rise in demand for advanced math classes and the beginning of teacher shortages in this field, elite parents started exerting pressure to secure spots for their children. Reflect on how this pressure might have affected access to advanced educational opportunities for students from less privileged backgrounds. How does this compare to the national push in the previous decades to identify and nurture talent broadly across socioeconomic lines? Reflection on persistent educational divides. Despite the national drive to integrate advanced math education in the past, Title IX continued to provide remedial services predominantly to low-income students in the 1980s. Reflect on the implications of this continued separation of educational tracks. What does this tell us about the persistence of educational divides based on socioeconomic status? Reflection on the role of federal policies. Consider how federal policies like Title IX and changes in vocational education funding influenced the educational landscape. How did these policies help in addressing or failing to address the educational needs and career aspirations of diverse student populations? The 1990s. Welcome to a pivotal era in the story of educational data and advocacy. As we embark on exploring the 1990s, a decade of significant transformation in the use of educational data, it's essential to anchor our discussion in both a personal and historical context. I, along with my colleagues, spent this transformative decade deeply embedded in North Carolina's educational system, evaluating the impact and efficacy of grant-funded programs. Our experiences during this time provided us with a unique vantage point to witness the seismic shifts in how data was collected, analyzed, and utilized across various educational landscapes. The 1990s marked a critical juncture where the mere availability of data began to challenge long-standing educational practices and assumptions. As analysts and educators working on the ground, We encountered firsthand the complexities and the often confounding scenarios that arose from a nascent data-driven approach. Schools and districts grappled with integrating this new influx of information into their operational and strategic frameworks, frequently stumbling over the nuances of data interpretation and application. This chapter aims to unpack these challenges and to shed light on the evolving role of data in educational decision-making. By delving into our direct experiences, complemented by broader educational developments, we hope to provide insights into how the groundwork laid in the 1990s has influenced contemporary educational practices. Understanding this decade's trials and triumphs is crucial for appreciating the current landscape of data-driven education and for anticipating the path forward. Teachers' Lounge Conversation, early 1990s. Mr. Johnson, have you guys seen the new department they've set up at Central Office? They're calling it Research and Program Evaluations. I heard they're churning out massive notebooks filled with spreadsheets of every student's scores. Ms. Evans. Yeah, I saw the principal using one of those as a doorstop the other day. Can you believe it? Mr. Thompson. And now they're on our case too. Someone from that office keeps asking for detailed info on every kid we work with for some federal report. It's such a hassle. Mrs. Carter. I heard that having this kind of data might actually help us snag some of those competitive federal grants. There's talk about a grant to boost resources in our magnet schools, and another to tackle reading issues in schools where too many kids are falling behind. Ms. Lopez. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but that data isn't much use to us directly, except maybe as doorstops, like you said. But if it brings in more money for resources, I'm all for it. Mr. Andrews. Did you hear we can't smoke in here anymore? Some nonsense about secondhand smoke being harmful. Ms. Fletcher. And about those surveys they made us take after the last professional development session. Apparently, they were funded by one of those grants. We had to rate whether we thought the resources and training were any good. Mr. Allen. I heard they compile all those survey responses, write reports, and then present the findings to the school board. Seems like a lot of hoops to jump through just to justify some funding. Mrs. White. It's all changing so fast. I miss the days when teaching felt simpler, and we didn't have all these extra layers of bureaucracy. Mr. Johnson. Well, I hear we're talking millions of dollars in potential funding from these grants. So maybe, just maybe, it's worth the extra paperwork. Mrs. Carter. So, Mike's moved to that new data department, right? From managing gym classes to data? Mr. Johnson. Yeah, but don't worry. It's not like they hired any actual data experts. They just shuffled people from other departments. Like Linda from Reading. Now she's handling Title I data. Ms. Evans. Linda? But she's a reading specialist, not a data analyst. How hard can it be, though, right? Mr. Thompson. That's the spirit they're going with. Just pull in anyone who can read a spreadsheet, I guess. Mrs. White. It sounds a bit risky. Managing data isn't the same as managing a library or gym. There's a lot on the line with these federal grants. Mr. Allen. Indeed, but it's all about who can handle the bureaucracy, right? Linda's good with paperwork and reports. Plus, if the department can keep things running smoothly, maybe it's enough to just oversee the operations. Ms. Lopez. The secretaries got the computers because they replaced the typewriters. They will probably be the ones doing the number crunching. Mr. Andrews. True, but with millions in grants at stake, I hope they figure out it's not just about moving papers. We need that money to really make a difference here. Evaluating early federal programs, setting objectives and measuring outcomes. In the early 1990s, I began work in the newly formed Research and Evaluation Department of a large school system in North Carolina, focusing on the evaluation of federally funded educational programs. These programs predominantly aimed to support at-risk students, though the term remained broadly defined and loosely applied. After acquiring substantial experience, I left to start a business that continued similar evaluations on a broader scale. The programs evaluated typically described their objectives in terms of the services provided and the demographics of the students served, often lacking specific, measurable outcomes related to the actual educational impact. Initial EOG and EOC interpretation. Levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 were designated as indicators of proficiency, with Level 3 representing grade level competence and Level 4 exceeding it. The proportion of students achieving at these levels was used to assess the effectiveness of schools in delivering the educational standards required. Standardized tests in the 1990s. The end-of-grade EOG tests in North Carolina were rolled out in 1993. These tests were introduced as part of the statewide efforts to assess student mastery of the content outlined in the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. The EOG tests focus on core academic areas such as reading and mathematics for students in grades 3 through 8. End-of-course EOC tests were developed for some high school courses. Before the adoption of the end-of-grade EOG tests, North Carolina utilized the California Achievement Tests, CAT, to gauge student performance across various subjects such as math, reading, and language arts. The transition to EOG tests represented a significant shift, aligning evaluations more closely with North Carolina's specific educational standards. The move from CAT, which primarily reported percentile ranks reflecting a fixed mindset, to EOG tests marked a paradigm shift. Unlike CAT, EOG tests aimed to measure how effectively schools were teaching the state's educational standards in core subjects. Initially, the EOGs were not designed for individual student assessment, but rather to assess school-wide success in imparting these standards. Despite this, individual scores were still distributed to parents, continuing past practices in which standardized test scores had limited practical use. This change to EOGs, which included 4 versions to ensure no student was tested on all standards, provided a comprehensive view of a school's instructional success. It was a significant step toward utilizing data to evaluate adherence to educational standards, fundamentally changing the approach to student assessment and educational accountability. Funds for at-risk. Real examples of grant-funded programs. Example 1. Elementary School Technology Grant. In one North Carolina school system, a grant initiative launched a technology integration program across 4 elementary schools. The grant funded the installation of advanced technology, employed coaches to assist teachers in developing tech-integrated lessons, and provided adaptive reading software that adjusted to each student's learning pace. This technology-centric educational approach was initially rolled out from kindergarten through 1st grade and expanded each year up to 5th grade. In the 1990s, school systems often saw federal grants not to genuinely improve educational outcomes, but to maintain funding for programs serving at-risk students. Influenced by fixed mindsets about the educational limitations of low-income and minority students, these programs seldom focused on transformative educational practices. Consequently, evaluation reports were treated more as a formality to meet funding requirements rather than as tools for refining educational strategies and enhancing student success. Grant priorities, services over success, sus, given FUF. Although it was not mandated for the accountability reports, we, as evaluators, decided to assess the impact of the technological intervention on students' reading levels. Over the course of the grant's 5-year span, there was a remarkable increase in literacy. The percentage of students reading at grade level jumped from approximately 30% to over 80% in all 4 schools involved. However, the conclusion of the grant period led to unforeseen changes. A subsequent grant was awarded that required a shift in focus from technology to alternative teaching methodologies. This new grant targeted these 4 schools specifically for their high at-risk student populations, which boosted the grant application's competitive edge in the scoring process. It seemed no one was reading the evaluation reports. Consequently, the previously installed computers were removed to align with the new grant's requirements. Many teachers transferred to other schools in frustration. Over the following years, this abrupt change led to a decline in student proficiency, with reading levels dropping below those recorded before the initial technology grant. Example 2. Magnet School Grant. Toward the end of the 1990s, federal education grants began requiring measurable objectives. They did not have to be related to academics, but they had to be a quantifiable objective for the evaluator to report. This was the beginning of concrete accountability. School integration was pursued through two primary methods. The first involved busing low-income and minority students to predominantly white schools to foster racial integration. The second method focused on enhancing schools in economically disadvantaged areas with large minority populations by introducing specialized and enriched programs, known as magnet programs. These programs aimed to draw applications from white parents eager for distinctive educational opportunities for their children, thereby diversifying the student body. Numerous federal Department of Education grants targeted these magnet schools, providing significant funding. For instance, a grant writer in a North Carolina school district proposed a grant with the objective of significantly increasing the number of applicants to these magnet schools, using the funds to offer even more enrichment opportunities. During the evaluation phase, we encountered challenges in obtaining the necessary baseline applicant numbers. The Research and Program Evaluation Department, where the grant writer was based, lacked this information. We consulted the Magnet Department, which informed us that parents did not apply to specific schools under the grants, but to various program types distributed across multiple schools. Only some of those schools were served by this grant. Each program was highly competitive, with approximately 100 applications for every available spot, indicating no need for additional applications. Additional applications would simply mean additional rejections. The Magnet Department explained that students who were admitted in kindergarten would advance to the next grade without reapplying, and siblings got priority for the kindergarten seats. Therefore, there were few available spots in any grades except kindergarten. One of the elementary school magnet programs was a gifted and talented program. We questioned how giftedness was determined since testing did not occur until third grade. The response was that parents could identify giftedness early on. The children admitted through applications were placed primarily in separate classes from local children from high poverty backgrounds, and they enjoyed the enriched curriculum that enticed them to apply. We wrote this report and accurately reported the numbers. If there was an evaluation report, the accountability requirements were fulfilled. It didn't matter what was reported. 1990s. Measurable objectives. During the 1990s, grant writers often included measurable objectives for which no data existed or that were unreasonable. Example 3. 21st Century Community Learning Centers, 21st CCLC. From 1994 to 1998, we conducted evaluations for after-school programs across every county in North Carolina, funded by a state agency. Many of these educational systems and nonprofit organizations transitioned to receiving 21st Century Community Learning Centers grants when they became available in 1998, which we also evaluated. These programs were consistently described as serving at-risk students, and evaluation reports primarily focused on detailing the demographic characteristics of these students. However, a significant change in how these programs were evaluated was on the horizon. Reflections. Attitudes about data. Given that successful programs could be discontinued despite positive evaluation outcomes, how might educators' attitudes towards data collection and documentation have been shaped? Fixed versus growth mindsets. Reflect on the persistence of grant-funded programs targeting low-income and minority students, even after previous interventions successfully improved their academic performance to grade level. The 21st century begins. In this chapter, we explore the transformative landscape of education policy that emerged with the implementation of the No Child Left Behind (NCLB) Act in the early 21st century. NCLB marked a pivotal shift by mandating the use of pre- and post-academic data to measure educational outcomes, not only for accountability for federal grant-funded programs, but also for other reporting requirements. This chapter will include real examples from our work at EdStar, our evaluation company during this period, reflecting the typical experiences under NCLB. NCLB also necessitated a clearer understanding of educational assessments. It distinguished between aptitude rankings, which had traditionally predicted academic potential based on broad assessments, and content mastery, which focused on students' knowledge of specific subject matter. Moreover, it signaled a move towards a growth mindset, emphasizing improvement and learning over fixed assessments of ability. Though this shift was not explicitly communicated, leading to considerable confusion. This chapter delves into the implications of these changes, examining how schools navigated the new requirements and the broader impacts on educational equity and accountability. It highlights the dual realities schools faced, being in both the old and new worlds of educational objectives and practices. While the goals shifted from merely serving at-risk students to actively helping students catch up academically, not all educational practices changed simultaneously, creating a complex, sometimes contradictory educational landscape. Additionally, educators were expected to use increasingly available data to inform their practices, yet they often lacked the necessary skills or access to data, compounding the challenges of transition. These examples from EdStar's real-world experience highlight common scenarios that were normative during this transformative era in education, providing insight into the everyday realities and struggles of adapting to a rapidly evolving educational framework. Teachers' Lounge Conversation, early 2000s. Ms. Allen, we've got that new dropout prevention program rolling out. We need to start thinking about which students to refer. I'm thinking about referring Michael again this year since he was in that at-risk program last year. Mr. Thompson, Michael? But he was one of our better math students last year. Ms. Allen, exactly. That means he's got a lot of potential to succeed with more focused support in this program. Plus, he should be a positive influence in the group. Ms. Carter, I'm considering recommending Lisa. She rides the bus that goes through the high-poverty areas. Might be good to give her some extra support. Mr. Lopez, I was reading that Hispanic students have higher dropout rates, so I'm planning to recommend Maria. She could benefit from this. Mr. Harris, who's going to teach math in this freshman academy for the students at risk of dropping out? Ms. Johnson, it's going to be a first-year teacher. Most of us senior teachers are scheduled for other classes, and honestly, the math they need is basic since they're far behind. During this period, EdStar evaluated numerous dropout prevention programs, many of which were multi-year grants. These programs often started before the No Child Left Behind (NCLB) legislation took effect, leading to a sudden shift in accountability requirements. Initially, students were recommended for these programs based on perceptions of being at risk by teachers or school counselors. However, with the advent of NCLB, the requirements evolved significantly. Instead of simply identifying students as at risk, we were now required to document specific academic or behavioral traits that indicated a risk of dropping out. The programs had to establish clear objectives for success. For example, one objective might state that 75% of students who previously scored below grade level on their math end-of-grade tests would successfully pass Algebra 1 by the end of their freshman year. Additionally, dropout rates had to be reported annually, calculated from October to October enrollments, to ensure consistency and comparability. This shift demanded a more detailed description of how services were linked to intended outcomes and what research supported these methods. It was a departure from the earlier practice of primarily reporting demographic data, such as the percentage of low-income or minority students, and from more subjective measures like the perceived effectiveness of poverty training workshops for teachers. This new approach aimed to align educational interventions more closely with measurable academic improvements, marking a significant change in how program success was evaluated and reported. Typical conversation at EdStar early 2000s. Mary, I managed to gather the EOG data for our freshman academies, but I'm hitting a wall with the suspension records. No one seems to know where they are or how to access them. Janet, oh, those are stored separately in another department. We'll need to request that data and merge it with what we have. What about the attendance records? Did you get those? Mary, sort of. The school counselors provided them, but only in PDF format, over 50 pages for just 15 schools. There's got to be an electronic version of this somewhere, right? Janet. Definitely. It exists somewhere digitally. We need to track down the source. And now some schools are reporting that students in the dropout programs failed key courses like algebra or English I. How do we pull those grades? Mary. That's on the Sims operators, but we'll need to provide the exact course codes. And it's a mess. Different schools use different codes. Who would even know all of them? Janet. Meanwhile, most school teams are struggling to translate at risk into tangible academic and behavioral data, though nearly all have managed it, except one. The director there doesn't believe in data. He admitted to selecting students based on whether their names sounded like they belonged to minorities. He outright refused to dig deeper. Thankfully, the other schools are adapting well to the new standards. I don't know how they are doing this without having access to this data. I am concerned that this is going to be just like all the other programs we are evaluating that are switching midstream to describing the students academically, but they enrolled them based on gut feelings about being at risk. Mary. I'll have all the baseline data ready by next week. 1 week later. Mary. Janet, our findings are like what we are seeing in all these programs. Despite schools now defining their participants as underperforming in math or reading, or having failed core courses, about 85% of these students don't fit those criteria at all. Some were even in gifted programs, excelling in every EOG, with spotless behavioral records. Janet. How could they have been expected to know these data attributes of students? It was challenging even for us, and we do this professionally. We need to bring in the head of school counseling for our next meeting. They went through a similar revelation not too long ago, and he helped the school counselors get through the shock. All but one school used the data we provided and identified students who met the new at-risk criteria, which showed they were not likely to pass required courses. EdStar had to pull the data together for them in a usable form to help them identify students in the target population, because they had no way to access and combine the relevant data. Our findings were consistent with evaluation reports that school systems were doing themselves. Many evaluation reports from one of the major school systems during this period reported that services designed for students who were scoring below grade level served large numbers of students who scored at or above grade level prior to service. Conversations about 21st Century CCLC, early 2000s. Program Manager for Large School District. Our after-school program is a huge success. The students enjoy it and the parents appreciate that their kids have a safe, enriching place to be after school hours, especially since many can't afford private care. EdStar. With the new NCLB guidelines, we're required to document academic progress. We'll need to collect and compare reading scores from the beginning and end of the year for accurate reporting. 21 CCLC staff. That shouldn't be an issue. We already grouped the kids based on their initial reading levels, levels 1 and 2, to tailor the activities. We'll send over the rosters for baseline data soon. EdStar. Great. Could you also include their exact reading scores? We're looking to track detailed improvements, not just level transitions. 21 CCLC staff. Actually, we don't have direct access to the reading scores. They might be with someone at the central office. EdStar. If you don't have access to the scores, how are you determining who's level 1 or 2? 21 CCLC staff. We start with the free lunch list and then make assumptions based on their neighborhoods. One area is significantly poorer, so students from there are generally considered level 1. The bus routes they take also give us a good indicator. Even if we had the scores, they're in a format we aren't equipped to handle, so we haven't really used them. This conversation underscores the challenges and disconnects in data usage within educational programs, emphasizing the need for better integration and understanding of data-driven practices. A month later, Mary and Janet were able to find the person in central office who could provide the reading scores. The program participants' reading scores ranged from level 1 to level 4, with about half of the students scoring at or above grade level. At the year-end meeting, the staff informed EdStar that next year's after-school program would be limited to students who scored below grade level, in compliance with new guidelines. As a result, there was a significant drop in the school's reading scores. Teachers reported that parents, worried about the implications of the new rule and not wanting to leave out any of their children, instructed them to underperform on their end-of-year exams to ensure they qualified for the free, high-quality after-school care. Reflections for chapter on NCLB and data use in education. Challenges in accessing and using data for referrals. Reflect on the practical difficulties school staff face when expected to use data for student program referrals, especially when data is scattered across various formats and locations. Consider the historical reliance on paper records and individual student folders, and the transition to digital data that staff were not adequately trained to handle. How might the lack of centralized, accessible data and the requisite skills to interpret it impact the effectiveness of identifying students for programs? Implications of siloed data systems. Explore the consequences of having essential student data siloed in different departments or formats that are not interoperable. Discuss the unrealistic expectations placed on educators to seamlessly integrate this data for day-to-day decision-making without the necessary tools or training. What systemic changes would be required to enable more effective use of data in schools? Redefinition of at-risk as a proxy for academic data. Consider the shift in defining at-risk students from a broad, undefined category to a proxy for specific academic data under NCLB. Reflect on how this redefinition might perpetuate or disrupt previous practices. How does the reliance on old proxies, like free lunch status or neighborhood, affect the accuracy and fairness of program eligibility? Impact of program labels on advanced course enrollment. Reflect on the potential barriers created when students, particularly high-achieving minority or low-income students, are labeled as at risk and placed in programs like dropout prevention. How might this labeling influence teachers' perceptions and their likelihood of recommending these students for advanced courses? What are the long-term implications for students' educational pathways and opportunities? Educator preparedness for data-driven decisions. Delve into the readiness of educators to embrace data-driven decision-making within the educational framework established by NCLB. Consider the support and resources needed for educators to effectively transition to using academic performance data over demographic proxies. What steps can be taken to ensure educators are not only equipped with data, but also trained to use it constructively and ethically? The 2010s. Under the No Child Left Behind NCLB Act, schools failing to achieve adequate yearly progress, AYP, for 2 consecutive years were labeled as needing improvement. From the second year of not meeting AYP, these schools had to provide supplemental educational services, like free tutoring, to low-income students. This requirement was active from the enactment of NCLB in 2002 until its replacement by Every Student Succeeds Act, ASA, in 2015. EdStar assessed the impact of these supplemental services for various North Carolina school systems. While the intended goal was to elevate students to grade level using a remedial curriculum designed for those below grade level, the implementation often missed its mark. Our evaluations revealed that most students receiving services were already at or above grade level. Although the remedial support helped some students who were genuinely below grade level, it paradoxically caused a decline in performance for those who were initially at or above grade level, leading to lower subsequent scores. Here is a typical conversation between EdStar staff and school system staff. Mary, EdStar representative. Good morning. We're excited to start evaluating the effectiveness of your supplemental educational services. Could you provide us with the baseline reading scores for the students enrolled in the program? Mr. Thompson, school system staff. Oh, I'm not sure where those are exactly, but I can tell you that 21% of our low-income students are below grade level in reading. Mary, that's helpful to know. So, all the students in this remedial program are part of that 21%? Mr. Thompson. Well, all our low-income students are enrolled in the program. Mary, confused. I see. So, you're saying every low-income student is considered below grade level? Mr. Thompson, isn't that usually the case? On the drive home, Mary discusses with Janet. Mary, he didn't seem to grasp that only 21% are below grade level, yet they've placed all of them in the remedial program. There's a disconnect somewhere. Janet, absolutely. It sounds like they're equating low income with low achievement across the board. After obtaining the data, Mary, we've reviewed the scores, and it turns out over half of the kids in the program were already at or above grade level. In fact, 25% scored at the highest level possible. Mr. Thompson, you mean to tell me these aren't low-income students? Mary, no, they are definitely low income, but they're also performing well in reading. They don't need remedial services based on their scores. Mr. Thompson, astonished. Who would have ever thought that low-income students could score at the highest level? Mary, Julie, how's the report coming along? Julie, EdStar's writer. I'm actually quite stuck. The policy for the supplemental services states that only students failing or at risk of failing should be served. However, the program here is serving all low-income students with remedial reading materials, aiming to bring them to grade level, though most are already there. Mary, that does sound like a contradiction. How does the policy address low-income students specifically? Julie, well, the policy specifies that all students who receive free lunch must be served, which they've interpreted as every low-income student needing these services, regardless of their actual performance. Mary, sounds like they're equating economic status directly with academic need. Julie, exactly. I called the U.S. Department of Education Title I office to clarify whether the policy is for students who are failing or at risk of failing, or for those receiving free lunch. Later, after receiving a response, Julie, they confirmed that for the purposes of this program, students who are failing or at risk of failing and students who receive free lunch are considered one and the same. Mary, that's quite an assumption. The Title I staff in 2 different school systems recently told me that same thing, that below grade level and free lunch are the same thing. I wonder if that means they believe these services will never bring the students to grade level, since the services don't change their families' incomes. Mr. Thompson, that's surprising. Who would have ever thought that low-income students could score at the highest levels? I am not sure what we should do with your report because it is just going to confuse everyone. Julie, let me get the logic here straight. They think low income and reading below grade level are one and the same. Their goal for this program is that the services will bring the students to grade level. But if the students are still poor and being poor is the same as reading below grade level, how could the program possibly result in them reading at grade level? None of this makes any sense. More research analyses of data, Race to the Top, initiated in 2010, offered significant financial incentives to states for implementing extensive educational reforms in K-12 education. These reforms aimed to elevate curricular standards across the board, incorporate student performance into teacher evaluations, enhance the use of technology for data management, and shift the focus from mere classroom attendance to actual content mastery. North Carolina, as part of its efforts under the Race to the Top grant which it received in 2010, incorporated the Education Value-Added Assessment System, EVAAS, into its teacher evaluation process. EVAS is a statistical analysis tool that measures student growth by comparing their predicted academic growth to their actual performance. This approach allowed North Carolina to meet Race to the Top's requirement for integrating student outcomes into teacher evaluations, emphasizing the state's commitment to accountability and improvement in educational practices. EVAS can promote growth mindset. EVAS promotes a growth mindset by identifying which students are likely to succeed with typical instruction and which may require exceptional teaching and additional support to thrive. In 2009, EVAS analysis revealed that while approximately 25,000 eighth graders were enrolled in Algebra 1, an additional 35,000 students were also predicted to be capable of succeeding in the course without having been given the opportunity. SAS 2009. EdStar partnered with schools to leverage EVAS projections for strategically placing students into 8th grade algebra courses. This initiative was especially critical for advancing low-income and minority students who, despite demonstrating potential in EVAS forecasts, were frequently overlooked for advanced placement by teachers. Throughout North Carolina, EdStar supported school counselors, school improvement teams, and principals in using EVAS to spot students who had been missed for advanced math placements, but were predicted to excel. Despite the success of nearly all students who were moved into advanced classes, there was significant resistance and objections from some parents. They feared the courses would be dumbed down, even though the students moved had higher EVAS success projections and stronger math backgrounds than some of those traditionally recommended by teachers. More changes in education grants. In the later 2010s, federal education grants evolved to require not only measurable objectives, but also the inclusion of baseline data within the grant proposals themselves. This change mandated that applicants demonstrate the need for their proposed program up front, rather than relying on post-grant evaluations to assess outcomes against initial conditions. This shift aimed to ensure that programs were clearly justified and targeted based on pre-existing needs from the outset. During this time, a major school district in North Carolina enlisted EdStar's expertise to draft a GEA-RUP grant proposal. With heightened awareness of the academic disparities between white and minority students in mathematics, fueled by the No Child Left Behind Act, the district aimed to address these gaps to enhance the appeal of their grant application. The Gear Up program, designed to prepare low-income students for college success, promotes enrollment in rigorous high school courses. To strengthen their funding proposal, the district set a specific goal to increase the number of minority students scoring at the highest levels on the 7th grade math end-of-grade tests, and to facilitate their progression into 8th grade algebra. The project involved several middle schools, and to establish the necessary baseline data for the grant, EdStar gathered EOG scores and algebra enrollment figures from these schools. This set the stage for a subsequent discussion with the district staff about the data and strategies. The district's strategy focused on supporting students at Level 2, with the aim of elevating them to Level 3 and ultimately to Level 4 proficiency. Janet. Mary has just finished analyzing the current Algebra I enrollment data for the 4 middle schools. Surprisingly, almost a third of those enrolled didn't score a Level 4, the highest level, on their 7th grade math EOG. Mary. Yes, and what's even more concerning is that among the minority students who did score Level 4 last year, a total of 165 across these schools, only 3 are enrolled in algebra this year. School staff member. That's because students need a teacher recommendation to enroll in algebra, and sadly, only 3 minority students received one. Julie. Wouldn't it be more logical to set your objective on ensuring that minority students who already scored Level 4 are enrolled in algebra, rather than trying to elevate Level 2 students to Level 4, especially since your goal is to increase minority enrollment in 8th grade algebra? We already wrote the section of the proposal explaining that enrollment in 8th grade algebra leads to more rigorous high school courses. That is the whole basis of this proposal. Janet. Exactly, Julie. If we already have a significant number of minority students scoring at Level 4, shouldn't the goal be to ensure they are recommended for algebra, rather than only trying to increase the number of Level 4 scorers? As it stands, Level 4 minority students rarely get recommended for algebra. So, increasing their numbers won't necessarily increase minority enrollment. School staff member. The thing is, we were operating under the assumption that most minority students were at Level 1 or 2. We didn't realize the extent to which they're already performing at Level 4. We didn't even know we had many Level 3 minority students. School staff member. I don't think we should change our objective. Our narrative has been that we're trying to elevate students' academic performance from Level 2 to 4. Why would they fund us if we admit we already have 165 Level 4 minority students and no one recommended them for algebra? Janet. I see. By focusing on why these Level 4 minority students aren't being recommended, You could make a strong case for systemic change. School staff member. We understand, but we need to approach this tactfully. For now, we'll stick with using the 3 minority students currently in algebra as our baseline. Mentioning the 165 who aren't being recommended could complicate our funding narrative. Let's not mention that. Mary. Seriously? School staff member. I think it gives us a much better chance of getting the money. Julie to Janet and Mary. Okay, so now I have to write about how those students the other district assumed were level 1 and 2 in reading and who received remedial services under their 21 CCLC grant were actually mostly levels 3 and 4. And about how the kids in the supplemental educational services in the other district were indeed all from low-income families, but most were proficient readers before receiving remedial services and have now regressed. If these folks secure this grant, I'll have to craft a narrative that they're trying to boost minority enrollment in algebra by increasing the numbers who aren't recommended for it. Thank goodness I took that creative writing course in college. I know you'll say not to lie, but also to make it not sound bad. Janet. Don't worry, Julie. We won't evaluate this one if they get it. BTW, they did get it. Reflections for chapter on equating low income with low achievement. Effects on students. What might be the long-term effects of remedial services on students who were above grade level initially, on self-perception and academic identity? What might be the consequences for a student's academic trajectory if they are perceived primarily through the lens of their economic status rather than their actual academic abilities? Staff at these schools hired EdStar to process their baseline EOG data because they didn't have the skills to do so. They were surprised to hear that a significant number of minority students had scored levels 3 and 4. Why might they have made these assumptions? Influence of remedial services on advanced course recommendations. Discuss how participation in remedial services might influence teachers' recommendations for enrollment in advanced courses. Discuss whether this practice was consistent with a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Policy and perception. How do policies that equate economic disadvantage with academic needs reinforce or challenge existing educational inequalities? Explore the potential for misallocated resources and opportunities due to these assumptions. The 2020s. This brings us up to the 2020s where we are now. To introduce the modern educational demands of the 2020s, we must first understand the evolution of educational frameworks that guide how students learn and apply knowledge. Original Bloom's Taxonomy, 1956. Developed by educational psychologist Benjamin Bloom and his team, the original taxonomy classified educational goals into 6 hierarchical categories: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. This framework supported traditional educational structures where higher-order thinking was reserved for a select few, reflecting a societal divide between thinkers, those trained for leadership and creative roles, and doers, those whose education focused on practical task execution. Thinkers and doers. Historically, educational systems categorized students into thinkers, those destined for analytical and leadership roles, and doers, those geared towards practical and task-oriented jobs. Today, we recognize the potential in every student to excel in both thinking and doing, irrespective of their background or previous achievements. Revised Bloom's Taxonomy, 2001. Recognizing the need for a more dynamic educational approach, Lauren Anderson, a former student of Bloom, and David Krathwohl revised the taxonomy to better suit modern educational objectives. The revision involved transitioning from nouns to action verbs, highlighting active learning processes, remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Reversing the highest 2 levels to emphasize the priority of creating over evaluating, underscoring the importance of innovation and production. Introducing a matrix that crosses cognitive processes with types of knowledge, factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive, which supports the idea that comprehensive education should develop complex thinkers and skilled practitioners alike. This shift underscores a modern philosophy where critical thinking, problem solving, and creativity are essential for everyone, not just the academically elite. The revised taxonomy supports an inclusive educational model that prepares all students to navigate a complex world, ensuring they are equipped to be both thinkers and doers. In this way, North Carolina's Department of Public Instruction's adoption of the revised Bloom's taxonomy not only aligns with but actively promotes a more holistic approach to education, preparing students for the diverse demands of the contemporary workforce. Reflecting on a decade of data-driven transformation in education. As we conclude our exploration of the past, it is evident that the landscape of educational evaluation and data usage has undergone significant evolution. The increasing incorporation of data into educational practices has not only refined how we assess student and teacher performance, but also reshaped our approach to educational equity and effectiveness. The journey from rudimentary data collection to sophisticated analytics has highlighted the potential for data to empower teachers and improve outcomes. Educators have moved from viewing data as a bureaucratic requirement to seeing it as a crucial tool in their instructional arsenal. This shift has encouraged a more nuanced understanding of student needs and the strategies that best support their success. However, the integration of data into education is not without challenges. It requires ongoing professional development, access to technology, and a commitment to continuous improvement. A call to action. As educators, understanding the historical contexts, cultural shifts, and the lessons data provides is crucial. This understanding not only enriches our approach to teaching, but also equips us to effectively prepare students for post-secondary success. This includes grasping the evolving nature of courses and recognizing that career and technical education, CTE, has expanded beyond traditional doer roles to incorporate significant analytical and problem-solving skills, blending thinking and doing. The transition from a fixed mindset, where grades labeled students as C or A learners, to a growth mindset underscores a shift towards using formative assessments. These assessments are tools for educators to continuously adapt teaching methods to help all students master content, rather than merely categorizing their abilities. Formative assessments. This guide will delve deeper into these themes, exploring how data and educational policies influence the pathways to success, and how we can harness this understanding to foster an educational environment that is adaptive, inclusive, and forward-thinking. Formative assessments. Guiding steps in learning. Imagine formative assessments as being like taste tests in the kitchen while preparing a complex dish. Just as a chef samples the sauce to understand what's missing or what's just right, formative assessments are tools for both the teacher and the student to pinpoint what's been grasped and what still needs work. It's a bit like trying out a new recipe. You wouldn't keep adding salt if it's already seasoned perfectly, right? Similarly, these assessments help ensure that students aren't just spinning their wheels learning something they've already mastered. Quizzes. These are quick checks that teachers use to gauge understanding on a specific topic. Think of them as the temperature checks in education, giving immediate feedback on how well the material is being absorbed. Checked homework. This isn't just about marking things right or wrong. Teachers review homework to identify areas where students might be struggling, offering a chance to address issues before they become stumbling blocks. Online learning programs. Online learning programs often provide detailed data on where each student is in their learning process, helping to tailor instruction to meet individual needs. It's completely natural in cooking to adjust as you go, just like it's normal in learning not to get everything right on the first try. Think about learning to ride a bike. You don't just hop on and zoom off. You wobble, you adjust, you learn. That's what formative assessments are in the classroom. They're the training wheels that give students and teachers insights into where the balance is off, allowing for real-time adjustments in learning strategies. In essence, formative assessments shift the educational approach from a one-shot, pass-or-fail model to a more dynamic, interactive process. just as a gardener doesn't just plant seeds and hope for the best, but rather nurtures, prunes, and adjusts care. Based on how the plants are growing, teachers use these assessments to nurture and guide their students' learning journey. They are crucial checkpoints, not final judgments, reflecting the understanding that teaching and learning are evolving processes, not just end results. Benchmark assessments, curriculum checkpoints, and college readiness indicators. ACT. Benchmarks. Benchmarks are typically used to gauge a student's preparedness for future academic challenges, be it the next level of schooling, a new concept within a course, or readiness for college-level coursework. They serve more as a barometer to measure educational progress against specific standards or goals, rather than a tool for assigning grades to individual students. The class or school scores on benchmark tests might indicate that some standards are not being taught well. English. A score of 18 or higher indicates a student is prepared for college-level English. Math. A score of 22 or higher suggests readiness for college algebra. Reading. Scoring 22 or more points indicates the ability to handle college social science courses. Science. A score of 23 or above signifies readiness for introductory college biology. These tests are not about penalizing students for what they don't know, but rather about identifying areas where further support or development is needed. Benchmarks can be constructive and guiding tools in a student's educational journey. In a broader context, benchmarks are often used to gauge readiness to succeed moving forward. A notable example is the ACT subject matter benchmarks. These benchmarks are specifically designed scores on the ACT test that indicate the likelihood of a student succeeding in first-year college courses. These benchmarks compare students' performance against established criteria of college readiness, offering valuable insights for students, parents, and educators. Understanding these scores can help in making informed decisions about a student's readiness for college-level work and in identifying areas where additional focus or support might be beneficial. Thus, benchmark assessments are more than just a reflection of an individual student's progress. They are a vital tool in measuring and improving educational effectiveness and preparing students for future academic challenges. Standardized assessments, understanding end of grade, EOG, and end of course, EOC, assessments. In North Carolina, students encounter standardized assessments throughout their school years. Evolution and transformation of standardized testing. Rethinking the traditional approach. Originally, standardized tests were designed to evaluate students' cognitive abilities, with tasks like pattern recognition or passage-based comprehension questions. The results ranked students, labeling those at the top as the best thinkers. However, this approach overlooked a critical factor. Cultural experiences and prior learning, including vocabulary exposure, significantly influenced these scores. This realization brought to light the inherent bias of these tests. They may not have truly identified the best thinkers, but rather reflected the advantages of certain socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds. Shift in testing philosophy and educational equity. The adoption of the No Child Left Behind, NCLB, Act marked a significant shift in this approach. States, including North Carolina, were required to establish clear educational standards for each subject and grade level. As a result, standardized tests evolved from percentile rankings to a more equitable level score system, focusing on measuring how well students had learned these set standards. Understanding North Carolina's level score system. North Carolina's standardized tests now classify student performance into 5 levels. North Carolina standardized tests. End of grade, EOG. Math and reading, grades 3 through 8. Science, grades 5 and 8. End of course, EOC. Math 1, Math 3, Biology, English 2. Level 1 and Level 2. These levels indicate a limited mastery of the standards, signaling that students may need additional support to succeed in the next grade. Level 3. This level represents basic proficiency, showing that the student has met the essential standards. Level 4. A solid mastery of the standards is denoted by this level. Level 5. This highest level signifies an exceptional understanding and mastery of the curriculum. Contrasting sharply with the old system, where only a small group was identified as top performers, the level system is designed with a broader achievement goal. Ideally, most students will achieve level 3 or higher, proving they have effectively learned the grade-appropriate material. Rethinking math education. Mathematics education has been deeply influenced by both evolving cultural perspectives and the increasing use of data to guide educational practices. Historically, the approach to math instruction has varied significantly across different tracks: advanced, standard, and remedial. Advanced tracks have typically emphasized conceptual understanding and problem-solving skills, aiming to prepare students for higher education and dynamic careers. In contrast, standard and remedial tracks have often focused on computational skills, which may limit students' ability to engage with more complex mathematical concepts and reduce their access to lucrative STEM opportunities. These differences in instructional methods reflect broader societal views about education and ability, where data now plays a crucial role in challenging old paradigms. By leveraging detailed academic data, educators are better equipped to tailor instruction to meet diverse student needs, breaking down traditional barriers and fostering a more inclusive learning environment. These changes have reshaped math education, highlighting the critical role of data in transforming teaching strategies and student outcomes. Legislative changes in North Carolina. In response to a growing demand for fair and equal access to advanced education, North Carolina enacted legislation in 2018, known as House Bill 986. This law mandated that students who achieve the highest scores on standardized math tests are to be enrolled in the most challenging math classes available. This move marked a significant stride in making education more equitable, ensuring that a student's demonstrated mastering of prerequisite knowledge, rather than any inherent biases, guides their academic path. The legislation was further reinforced in 2019 with the introduction of Senate Bill 500. While achieving the highest test score is not the sole criterion for success in advanced math, the law guarantees that students who do achieve these top scores are not denied access. It allows teachers to continue recommending students with lower standardized test scores for advanced courses, while also obliging them to accommodate students who score at the highest levels. Historically, the path to advanced math classes in high school was often predetermined by middle school placements. Typically, students identified for the advanced track took algebra, or Math 1, in middle school. These students then, almost exclusively, progressed to honors math classes in high school. For those who faced challenges in middle school algebra, a special elective course named Math 1 Plus was available in high school to help them stay on the advanced track. However, this option was not accessible to high-scoring students who were not on the advanced track in middle school. Essentially, middle school served as the gateway to advanced math. Under the new legislation, students who may not have taken algebra in middle school, perhaps due to scheduling conflicts or lack of content master, or simply lack of a recommendation from a teacher, but who score at level 5 on the Math 1 EOG in high school, now can enroll in honors math courses. This change dismantles the middle school gate and opens opportunities based on demonstrated ability rather than past course placements. However, developments in 2019 cast a shadow over the effectiveness of this legislation. That year saw a recalibration of the scoring ranges for level scores, with a significant impact on high school students' performance on the Math 1 EOC. The change was so drastic that virtually no high school student managed to achieve level 5 on the Math 1 EOC, a stark contrast to previous years where a substantial number, especially in affluent areas, routinely hit this top mark. Change in level score cuts. A change in the scoring system in 2019 reduced the number of students scoring level 5 on Math 1 EOC, effectively to 0. This reclosed the gate for entering advanced math after middle school. This shift was not immediately evident, as the school report cards began reporting levels 4 and 5 as a combined category. However, a closer look at the district report cards, which separated these levels, revealed a startling fact. Statewide, no high school student was scoring at level 5 on the Math 1 EOC. Consequently, the well-intentioned bill, aimed at opening doors to advanced math classes based on merit, seemed to have lost its potency due to these changes in scoring. To investigate further, especially considering the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on educational outcomes, the authors examined data from high-achieving schools in Wake and Mecklenburg counties. Interestingly, the percentage of students meeting the benchmark on ACT math remained consistent, suggesting that the drop in level 5 scores was not a result of a general decline in math abilities. Both teachers and parents should understand the absence of a level 5 score for a student in high school Math 1 is not an anomaly, but a widespread outcome under the current scoring system. Thus, not achieving level 5 should not be seen as a reflection of your child's capabilities or potential in math. Graduation requirements versus college admission requirements. In the rapidly evolving educational landscape of North Carolina, understanding the distinction between high school graduation requirements and college admission requirements is more critical than ever. Recent initiatives and legislative changes have highlighted a significant gap between graduating from high school and being prepared for college-level work. The gap between graduation and college readiness. North Carolina's efforts, particularly through the Career and College Ready Graduates (CCRG) program, have been focused on bridging this gap. The CCRG program, developed in collaboration between the State Board of Community Colleges and the State Board of Education, aimed to reduce the number of students needing developmental courses in college. This initiative reflects a broader recognition that high school graduation criteria do not necessarily align with the readiness skills required for college success. Career and College Ready. Scoring what is reported as Career and College Ready on the NCEOG or NCEOC is not the same as meeting the benchmarks for being ready for college courses. Addressing remedial education needs. A considerable number of North Carolina high school graduates find themselves underprepared for college, especially in mathematics. For instance, a report indicates that in 2017, nearly 72% of North Carolina juniors failed to meet the college-ready benchmark in math on the ACT. This statistic is alarming and underscores the need for more alignment between high school exit standards and college entrance expectations. Legislative response. In response, North Carolina has made strides in aligning high school curricula with college expectations. Legislation like Section 10.13 of the North Carolina Session Law 2015-241 and subsequent amendments have directed high schools and community colleges to collaborate, providing opportunities for students to meet remedial education requirements before graduating high school. However, despite these efforts, challenges in implementation and the shifting landscape of standardized testing present ongoing hurdles. The reality in high schools. High schools report a significant portion of their students taking longer, slower-paced versions of math courses, which were originally intended for struggling students. This shift has inadvertently led to many high-performing students being enrolled in these courses, affecting their preparedness for college-level math. High schools could check the degree to which this is true in their school by getting a data set of freshmen that includes the 8th grade math EOG score and 9th grade math enrollment. Access to rigor. Check how many students scored levels 4 or 5 on the 8th grade math EOG and are taking foundations of Math 1 in 9th grade. The disconnection between high school graduation requirements and college admission standards, particularly in math, is a pressing issue. As parents and educators, understanding this divide and the efforts being made to bridge it is crucial for guiding students through their educational journey, ensuring they are not only able to graduate, but also to succeed in their post-secondary endeavors. Timeline of changes. Shift in college admission requirements. Focus on higher math. First geometry added, then algebra 2. This is why they were in that order in high school. Push for teachers and school counselors to identify students who might someday work in mission control and get them into advanced math. Man on the Moon. Peak of the space race with USSR. Title I established under ESEA, Civil Rights Act of 1964. height of the civil rights movement. Beginning of school integration. Brown versus Board of Education. Segregated schools declared unconstitutional. Segregated schools prevalent in the U.S. Title IX prohibits gender discrimination in any federally funded education program. A Nation at Risk. Report calls for educational reform and higher standards. A Common Core State Standards Initiative. Introduction of common educational standards across states for mathematics and English language arts. Rise of EdTech. Use of technology personalizes learning and provides significantly more formative assessment data. COVID-19 pandemic. Shift to remote learning and sparking innovations in educational delivery. STEM focus. Increase in technology use requires higher-level problem-solving skills in most careers. This increases the need for and value of advanced math and science courses. Education for All Handicapped Children Act guarantees free and appropriate education for children with disabilities. Emergence of the personal computer. Americans with Disabilities Act. Gender equality in education enforced. Common Core State Standards Initiative implemented. Revised Bloom's taxonomy, emphasizing that everyone has the capacity to engage in both complex thinking and practical application. No Child Left Behind Act. Accountability through standardized testing. Enhanced focus on inclusive education. A Nation at Risk. Report calls for educational reform and higher standards. Integration of technology in education begins. Title IX of the Education Amendments Act. References. Abu El-Haj, T.R., and Rubin, B.C., 2009. Realizing the equity-minded aspirations of detracking and inclusion. Toward a capacity-oriented framework for teacher education. Curriculum Inquiry, 39-3, 435 to 463. Achieve Incorporated, 2008. Closing the Expectations Gap, 2008. An annual 50-state progress report on the alignment of high school policies and demands of college and work. Bromberg, M., and Theokas, C., 2014. Falling Out of the Lead. Following high achievers through high school and beyond. Education Trust, Shattering Expectation Series. Washington, D.C. Callahan, R.M., 2005. Tracking in High School English Learners. Limiting Opportunity to Learn. American Educational Research Journal, 42. 2 Summer, 305-328. Craddy, D., 2014. Do third-grade math scores determine students' futures? A statewide analysis of college readiness and the income achievement gap. North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, Raleigh, North Carolina. Dobby, W., and Fryer, Jr., R.G., 2011. Are high-quality schools enough to close the achievement gap? Evidence from a social experiment in Harlem. American Economic Journal, 3-3. Dweck, C.S., 2006. Mindset. The New Psychology of Success. Random House. Dynarski, S.M., 2016, April. Why Talented Black and Hispanic Students Can Go Undiscovered. The New York Times, New York, New York. EdStar. 2009. 2009 Dropout Prevention Grant Recipients Program Evaluation. Final Report. Raleigh, North Carolina. Education Trust. 2006. Yes, We Can. Telling Truths and Dispelling Myths About Race and Education in America. Washington, D.C. The Education Trust. Gamoran, A. 2009. Tracking and Inequality. New Directions for Research and Practice. Garrity, D. 2004. Detracking with Vigilance. By opening the high-level doors to all, Rockville Center closes the gap in achievement and diplomas. The School Administrator. Guo, J. 2015, September. These kids were geniuses. They were just too poor for anyone to discover them. The Washington Post. Washington, D.C. Marks, G.N., Cresswell, J. and Ainley, J. 2006. Explaining Socioeconomic Inequalities in Student Achievement. The Role of Home and School Factors. Educational Research and Evaluation. 12-2, 105-128. Moore, D.R., and Davenport, S. 1988. The New Improved Sorting Machine. Madison, Wisconsin, National Center on Effective Secondary Schools. O'Connor, C., Lewis, A., and Muller, J. 2007. Researching Black Educational Experiences and Outcomes. Theoretical and Methodological Considerations. SAS Institute. 2009A. Identifying Students Who Are Ready for Algebra. I. Algebra Readiness Curriculum Supplement. Raleigh, North Carolina. SAS Institute. 2009B. Mathematics Talent Identification and Reclamation in Moore County School District. Raleigh, North Carolina. Singleton, G. and Linton, C. 2006. Courageous Conversations About Race, a Field Guide for Achieving Equity in Schools. Thousand Oaks, California, Corwin Press. Pseudomayor, J.M., and Schroff, R. 2022. Differences in academic preparedness do not fully explain Black-white enrollment disparities in advanced high school coursework. Sociological Science, 11, 138-163. Sparks, E., Johnson, J., and Akos, P., 2010. Dropouts, Finding the Needles in the Haystack. Educational Leadership, 67-5, 46-49. Stiff, L.V., Johnson, J.L., and Akos, P., 2011. Examining What We Know for Sure, Tracking in Middle Grades Mathematics. In W.F. Tate, K.D. King, and C.R. Anderson, eds. Disrupting Tradition, Research and Practice Pathways in Mathematics Education. First edition, pages 63-75. Reston, Virginia. National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Inquiries Stone, C.B., 1998. Leveling the Playing Field, An Urban School System Examines Equity in Access to Mathematics Curriculum. The Urban Review, 30, 295-307. Stone, C.B., and Turba, R., 1999. School Counselors Using Technology for Advocacy. Journal of Technology and Counseling, 1-1, 1-15. Theokas, C., and Saris, R., 2013. Finding America's Missing AP and IB Students. Washington, D.C. Vandenberg, L., Dennison, E., Hornstra, L., and Vuitton, M., 2010. The Implicit Prejudiced Attitude of Teachers. American Educational Research Journal, 47-2, 497-527. Van Fossen, B.E., Jones, J.D., and Spade, J.Z., 1987. Curriculum Tracking and Status Maintenance. Sociology of Education, 1987, 104-122. About the author. Dr. Janet Johnson, president of EdStar Analytics, Inc., has made significant contributions to the field of educational research and program evaluations. Dr. Johnson has a robust academic background, having taught in K-12 and at the university level, that enriches her work in tackling the intricate challenges of education. With a professional journey in educational research and evaluations that spans over 3 decades, she has committed her career to improving educational outcomes. Her participation on various national committees have been crucial in shaping educational policies and practices. As a co-founder of EdStar Analytics with Dr. Lee V. Stiff, Dr. Johnson has spearheaded numerous projects that leverage data analytics to enhance educational equity and efficacy. Her dedication to educational reform is evident in her use of comprehensive data analysis to guide policy decisions that impact student success and expand access to advanced educational tracks. Dr. Johnson's collaborative efforts with figures like Marvin Pittman and Senator Howard N. Lee have been pivotal in advocating for the access of high-scoring minority students to advanced mathematics courses, emphasizing her commitment to educational equity.